Hi, I'm John,
I'm Matt.
and this is a Literate Book Club.
Yes, it is.
I did it backwards on you.
Yes.
I switched it up.
They did switch up. Now, this is going to be our erratic version and spoiler review of Joker.
Yeah, he's starting to get to us now.
Yes,
we've had a good hour to sit with the after effects of the Joker.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's right. That's really you get it.
Leave it to Mark Hamill. All right.
Well, and Joaquin Phoenix at this point. He was excellent.
He was
okay.
Excellent.
So
hopefully you've seen the movie.
Right. If you're watching this, then hopefully you've watched the movie, or you're just don't care. Either way, if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, then stop watching this, but keep it running.
And be sure to check out our spoiler-free review so you can know our general thoughts before you go watch it.
I must put that up here somewhere.
Up there?
Yeah, it'll probably like be a gray bar. Okay. Somewhere. All right. So spoiler-free. So
no, this is spoiler.
That's what I meant. Spoiler. I mean, like, I'm free to say spoilers. Okay. So, that's what I meant.
So let's start. What was anything goes? What was your top, say, 3 things that you really liked about this movie?
Boy, well, we kind of talked about that. Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal was excellent.
Right.
And I don't know if you're talking specifics about what happened.
Yeah, what are some things that really stood out to you in the movie, like moments?
I just thought the way that he almost became this icon without really trying to become that icon.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean?
So you have the event where
especially at the very end, where he's kind of, to a certain degree, where he's standing up and everybody's almost admiring or almost worshiping not worshiping, but you know what I'm saying, they're looking to him like their leader. And it was funny to see, it was crazy to see the evolution of how he went from such almost like an introverted, beat down character to truly becoming like what we would think of as the Joker to a certain degree.
I agree with that. It was really interesting, like say that his evolution was accidental,
right?
And that's one thing that I really liked about this, that I felt was missing in both the previous movie iterations. When we look at Heath Ledger and we look at Jack Nicholson's story, the stories written around those Jokers, they're pretty intentional with what they do, right? I mean, they're
kind of calculated.
Like, he intends to make this chaotic scene, whereas for Joaquin Phoenix, Descent into Madness, people take notice of him for reasons that he was just being himself. He was just reacting to situations, and then all of a sudden it happened to tap into an said anger that was festering in the city. Apparently,
when he was being, let's I guess be clear, he was being his off medication, mentally ill.
Right. So but that's what I mean by him. So he was insane. He's an insane person. Right. That is the character. Yeah. And so when his insanity lashes out.
Yeah.
Which,
and I think that was they were kind of playing off that duality, and that's why they were making Gotham so harsh and so awful as to show, hey, this guy does have some crap going on and issues, but at the same time, that city is crazy. Right. And that system is crazy. And obviously there's some social commentary to go on with what's going on real time. But it was even more exaggerated, at least within this perspective of it.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean? Or you got to view somebody's perspective that maybe there's things like that are going on. Hopefully there won't be someone like that
how we deal with mental illness in general, how we treat people, especially in societal terms, the general courtesy of people from day to day,
the gap of inequality,
wealth gap and socioeconomic gaps, all that kind of stuff. Great tap in. And from what we said, the movie appears to happen in maybe the 70s. It's definitely not a modern tale.
No, for sure.
So that kind of lends to some of those highlights, I think.
And I think it was very interesting that, talking about the wealth inequality, and I'm not saying that there is a lot of that today, but looking historically speaking, when wealth gap becomes so large, a lot of times things like those riots do happen. You know what I mean? Or any time that
well,
there's some
when you get like people get desperate and get angry and all that kind of stuff.
And it just shows that there is a certain degree of people who are maybe like him that through environmental things and also maybe just brain damage and from just having illness that sparked him off. But it also showed that there was a whole group of people who maybe weren't really mentally ill but could buy into something like that just because of what was going on.
Well, I mean, that's something that's great about that I really liked about this movie. Is you can open up these conversations and talk about how people in desperate situations will gravitate towards people who they shouldn't.
Right. I mean, we have a lot of that in cult situations.
Cult situations, but also just in history, certain leaders in other realms than just religious or cult or you have political realms, you have business realms, you have people who become enigmatic for reasons that shouldn't be true, but the circumstances lend them to that.
Right, for sure. And I do think there's a sense of, since everything is super raw, and I'm going to let you talk more because I feel like I'm talking a lot during this.
Okay, I'll let you talk.
But since this was so raw, there's a sense of uncomfortableness in this movie. But at the same time, another part that was really uncomfortable is you can almost, obviously you don't relate with how he's doing things. And I think you've kind of touched on this when we were on the ride back. But there's certain things that he's saying that you can see why other people are getting around him in that current situation.
Right. And his criticism of the world around him is accurate.
Yeah.
But his response to it is horrid. It's just terrible.
Yeah. And obviously, his narcissism and everything. Right. At least, again, that's how they framed everything. And you could talk about, I want to later remind me to go back into cinematography because there's a few things I want to point out.
So just to kind of put a cap on the sort of mental illness and social commentary part that we've been talking about, the thing that I liked about how it showed this sort of tragic descent was, I don't know if you noticed this, but throughout the movie as he progresses, his mental breaks and the parts where he becomes more and more Joker also coincide with moments where he is forced to confront himself. Early on he has this sort of loose sense of himself that isn't really true. He thinks he's funny. He thinks he tells his mom that everyone thinks his material is worth going to the big clubs. He hasn't even performed yet. Right. He's just been scribbling in this journal. And so and he imagines he has a relationship with someone who barely knows his name, kind of thing. Right. So you have these mental breaks where he's suddenly confronted with his what he thinks of the world and what the world thinks of him, and the disparities between his mental picture of things and what really is the case. And
it was kind of odd because it was like the crazier his actions became, the less erratic his behavior became to a certain degree. I don't know. It looked like he was more confident.
He was more lucid and more. Yeah, he stood out more when he just let go. And fed into his own psychosis.
Yeah, to a certain degree. It was like he was very and to that extent, that's I think where you could see the pull, especially within that world, to a character like that.
Sure. And he became sort of the voice of angst and anguish and all that kind of stuff. Right. So before we get back into cinematography, I just want to do a quick. So this was a DC movie.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of talk about the bigger implications of some of the plot points that they decided to put in. As far as telling a DC story, this is during the era of, young Bruce, and his parents are still alive. In fact, they have Thomas Wayne, who's successful in life in general, talking about running for mayor. And then they do something that threw me back a little bit, which was tie Joker to Thomas Wayne.
And so I wasn't 100% sure, how that. Now it made it look like, from that letter that that was going to be the fact that it really was
Right, it was his child, and then that would make him and Bruce siblings.
Right.
So at least half siblings.
Exactly. But then later on, when they were talking about you're adopted and everything like that, now it almost feels like it was kind of hard to see whether or not was the mother that delusional and crazy, kind of like he was.
And that, I think, fed into our previous conversation about the sort of like, you don't know. Like, it made me question at some point. I was like, all right, either she was just completely crazy and made up this whole thing,
right,
as a way to sort of like go after Thomas for whatever reason.
Well, I think it was along the lines of that's how I saw it, the parallel of him and his neighbor.
Right. I
mean, he had
but
super infection.
But the thing is if he is adopted, like, some of those psychiatric problems are genetic, but how does he, like, just because his mom was delusional doesn't mean he is necessarily delusional, but he is delusional.
Right, that's true.
We just know he's delusional.
Yeah.
But my point is, she, while she's at the mental hospital and he's reading that transcript, is saying, no, he made up the adoption thing to cover up the affair.
Right.
And so it makes you question, like, is it possible that both she is crazy and Thomas Wayne is a kind of a scumbag who did this?
Right. And that, the idea that I mean, that could have drove her a little bit crazy to a certain degree. And it does make you, bearing into that point, it does make sense that, okay, then maybe he was related, because there is a genetic element to, it seemed like, what he had and what she had.
Right.
At the same time, there is such a big element of environmental issues as a child.
He was abused.
He was crazy abused. Brain damage can cause a lot of mental illness. But for it to supposedly mirror exactly what she had is a little bit odd.
It's kind of a...
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions like that. But in general, so we have this Joker and the Waynes are now intertwined.
Right, for sure.
And now, instead of, just the Waynes going out to a movie and they getting shot in a back alley by some random chance robbery, it is a consequence of the riots, and which makes this sort of poetic sense of the Joker ends up creating the Batman, knowing their story later on for fans of DC, that becomes has this poetic twist to it of saying this conflict that ends up becoming epic actually is all started in this kind of turmoil of his psychosis blended with the disparities of social life in Gotham in this era.
And I was really glad that they did have Bruce as a young man just yell out, "Martha!" I'm sorry, that didn't happen.
Yeah, on his knees.
Right. No!
If I meet someone with the same name,
I will never kill him. Okay. That was awful. But that
movie was awful.
That was a side note. Yeah, but that is interesting. I did feel like by the end of the movie, he at least bought into the fact that he was adopted. It didn't look like he believed.
Again, like I said, it's kind of like he confronts certain truths, and so then by the end of it, he's he's filled with all this confusion and anger, and that's what you see in his final moment when he's on the TV show. He's confronting, and then he just blows up about the fact that society just walks all over him, and people like him, and that these people who are on TV and have the wealth of the Waynes and all this stuff don't really care. They don't really look at them. They don't really notice them.
They look. They feel like they're above them.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
And he does play Thomas Wayne to that extent. He makes the comment about calling everyone who didn't pull their lives together clowns. And has a really elitist view of people. So that's also what plays into me, this like tarnishing of Thomas Wayne. And most of the other stories, you see Thomas Wayne as being portrayed as this like gallivant sort of rich person who is really desperately trying to help the world.
Right. And I think interestingly though, that's just how like you can, from seeing that, like Joaquin Phoenix is almost like in every scene. The Joker, this is the Joker movie. Yeah. And you can see how he literally became who he did because based upon everything that happened to him and that filter of how he saw the world.
Right.
And mixed with his mental illness and all that. Whereas with the other stories, even though they're not connected, it's interesting that these are all from Batman's perspective and Batman thinks he's the hero,
right,
beating up mentally ill people. No,
but no,
privilege. Right. No, but he is the hero, and he would look at his father in that light, especially from a child who lost his father.
Sure. And so yeah, we have all that. So that I think that all puts everything into an interesting twist. So, all right, we've done quite a bit on the story. Let's just, before we end, take a moment. Let's talk about cinematography.
Yeah. So one thing that I figured that this was going to happen just because of the poster.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I thought was really interesting as how, and we kind of talked about how he became almost more confident as he became,
let go
of certain things, and whether or not, obviously he shouldn't have let go in the manner that he did, but in that sense too, it's almost like his view of the world, even though he realized, he thought the world was crap, his view of his life is, it's a comedy. You know what I mean? At this point, like, he was almost like he was happy and he was in his own world. And I thought it's one thing that visually they did multiple times was it had him, like, in the very beginning, he was walking up those stairs very slowly. It was dark. It's dark and upset and everything. And they did that, I think, 2 or 3 more times where he was walking up, and it like gradually, especially by the end, it was like the sun. They show the sun coming through, and he's dancing down the stairs, and that like long slog of like what brought him down to a certain degree, or the visual representation, I thought was beautifully like mirrored in his entire outlook on himself and who he was like, then his world was like brightened up. And and I just thought it was very well lit and very. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of more cinematic things that happened, but I remember that just really sticking out to me. And as soon as I saw the staircase, I was like, I think that's the one from the poster where you get the sun beaming down. Yeah, and I was like, man, that's going to be interesting later.
Yeah, they do a really good job of using visual elements to like mark the progression of this character, whether you're talking like that, also like you think of his outfits,
for sure.
In the beginning he's wearing just the standard clown outfit, but he's beat up, it's just in a mess, and like they do a lot of scenes with him where he doesn't have a shirt on, or he has practically nothing on. It's really showing his gauntness, how skinny and decrepit his body seems to be.
Poor, he's not getting to eat much or
but
something.
The way, like, as you say, like his posture changes as the movie goes, and he starts standing up a little straighter, and you see more musculature than you do in the beginning of the movie.
And especially like by the end, like what you're talking about, like when he was on that talk show and he was smoking the cigarette, he's like watching him do his comments, and that's not bothering him anymore. You know what I mean? He's just like,
or he's
he's just like,
he's thinking about it. He's not like
affected, like he's not heartbroken about it. He's just seeing.
He's come to accept.
This is what you think of me.
Yeah.
And so visually, they did a great job, and obviously him as an actor, of again, like cinematography, everything, of just the way he melded in to his character.
And just to comment on that part too, like we said about this movie is so focused on him. It doesn't really shift off of him until the end.
Right.
And then that moment, so after the events of the talk show, and he gets cut off, that scene where it floats back and it's showing the monitor room.
Right.
And it's showing a mixture of replays of him, but also it's showing like the reactions, the effect he's having on the world. And that's when it goes to the scenes of the riot.
Yeah.
And then it really goes back, like it goes from tightly focusing on this character to suddenly seeing what this character has done, because throughout the whole movie you only get glimpses of it. Like the detectives coming to talk to him, like you see one person wearing a mask, then you start seeing a few more. You see the newspapers posting, you see things from his perspective, and you don't really get a sense of like how dramatic he has been on the city and how many people are reacting to him until that last scene where you see the riots. And then people bust the car up so they can drag him out. And then you basically have this adoring horde that surrounds him, all in paint or face masks, and and I think they did that really well.
They did
in cinematography, of being really honed on him as a character until the end, and then showing that panning out and showing the bigger perspective.
I mean, look, the movie is, to quote you in the other thing, it to a certain degree you know, the artistic point of view, it is a masterpiece. I think what makes it, like what I said, I don't necessarily always want just a masterpiece out of a movie. I more want the entertainment factor, and that's just what I value in my movie.
Having the light entertainment is fine, right? You know, the beach read or the whatever you want to call it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I absolutely
escapism.
I think these type of movies should exist. I think a lot of people were downing it, saying, "Oh, this movie's dangerous, and movie's this, and movie's that." And I think the uncomfortableness that people feel, and that even I feel, is, like I said, it's almost like the mirror to a certain degree on what our society is.
Well, and so like to make a little bit of a comparison here to what's already existed. To me, this for DC is what Wolverine was, or Logan. Logan was for Marvel. Like, it's their dark, it's their dally into something where it shows that this genre can be adult in the sense of being complicated and sometimes hard to watch and leaving you with mixed feelings. Like that's the classic hallmarks of a well-crafted movie. Right. And for you know, I love the Spider-Mans, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love all these things just because, you know, I, like a lot of us, except for Endgame, grew up with these things and I love them, but I also have loved the stories that they haven't put on screen yet that do this. And I'm really glad that they're doing this, and I think DC is capable of doing it better than Marvel, because DC as a source material often goes much darker than Marvel does.
I think also with Marvel they have such a formula that has worked monetarily at this point. And
DC, and I don't blame them.
Yeah,
for doing
well,
that.
and
you know,
DC, to be real, has had its up and downs.
Right.
So it can do this standalone type thing and take more risks. Yeah. You know, because
and
it's
they're
like
willing
to,
and
they're willing to.
And as a company, Warner Brothers and DC, I can see taking the risk on this kind of thing, where Disney is not going to.
Right. I think they'll take risk in different ways, but not in this social commentary. As strong or as realistic as this. So I think I don't want to beat a dead horse unless there's something else you can think of.
I think we've talked about all that we can talk about. We just watched this a couple hours ago.
Right. So it's very fresh. And
we're still processing a little bit. But seeing as you've sat through this whole thing with us, I'm assuming you either have seen it or you don't care about hearing some of the spoiler details.
Right.
Let us know what you think about this.
Yeah, and you can drop in the comments. And this, like I said, it's spoiler heavy. So, you know, comment away. Give your, you know, inside deep thoughts about it. We'd love to hear from you guys. Sometimes y'all give us more perspective and more insight than we
didn't really cover, like, the social aspect of, like, you know, there's some theaters that have banned this movie.
Right.
And stuff like that. But I don't think there's anything, like, I understand why they're doing it, and so, like, if you have comments on that, that's fine, but
you know, we're not trying to be political here.
We're not trying to get on that. I just, like, from my perspective, I'm not going to talk for him, but art should be freely available. I don't believe in censorship in that way.
Right.
I mean, we should have the conversations about this. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Right.
But other than that, everyone be, you know, civil, as the Joker says.
Oh, God. Yes.
You know, just a little civility. That's all.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Yes. Bye.